Engrossed second substitute Senate Bill 5536 be reported out of committee with a due pass recommendation.
It's been moved and second that engrossed second substitute Senate Bill 5536 be reported out to pass. We have a set of amendments here. There is a striking amendment, and I will move the striking amendment H-1740.1. I will move adoption of the striking amendment. And there are now amendments to the striking amendment. The chair recognizes Representative Griffey for Amendment 162.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Amendment 162.
It's been moved that we adopt Amendment 162. The chair recognizes Representative Griffey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This reinstates the gross misdemeanor offense in the underlying bill that was taken out with the striker. I move for its adoption.
Thank you. Remarks? Chair recognizes the vice chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Respectfully asking for a no vote on this amendment. I personally believe that substance use disorder is a health issue, and that by making it a misdemeanor is going too far, as the chair striker does. So reinstating into a gross misdemeanor really doesn't make sense. It's just more punishment where people really need more health care. And actually a gross misdemeanor, people will serve more time than they did than having a Class C felony, because with a Class C felony there are sentencing guidelines, whereas with a gross misdemeanor there are not. It's 0 to 364 days. A felony, it was, your first, second, or third offense of possession, sentencing range is 0 to 6 months. So it doesn't make sense to actually have more punishment when we are trying to move in a direction of more health care. So asking for a no vote.
Thank you. I'll also add that we heard from the cities in particular that they wanted the gross misdemeanor to attach because that would allow for a 2-year period of supervision, probation. But I actually looked up in RCW 3.50.3301B that even with the simple misdemeanor, a 2-year period of continuing jurisdiction is a normal. So whether it's a gross misdemeanor or a simple misdemeanor, that 2-year probation period is available. So taking the comments of the vice chair into account, where we don't want excessive punishment, 90 days of jail is too much for many of us already. But the probation period seems to be what was important, and that 2-year period is available under the misdemeanor as well. So asking that we not adopt this amendment. All those in favor of adopting Amendment 162, please say aye. Aye. And those opposed? No. Nay. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not adopted. The next amendment, the chair recognizes Representative Graham for Amendment 163.
Thank you, Chair. I'm understanding that 163 is scoped.
No. There's no scope issue for any of these amendments.
Okay, so this amendment...
Well, you need to move adoption.
Okay, I move to adopt PAT 163.
It's been moved that we adopt Amendment 163. Chair recognizes Representative Graham.
Thank you, Chair. So this appropriates $1.2 million for the general fund state to the Washington State Patrol for the analysis of evidence for suspected violations of certain drug offenses. This amendment is important because if we are going to ask officers to do these jobs, and if genuinely we are putting the safety of our families first, we need to be able to allow that information to be collected. And this would go a long way again towards going after the cartels and the gangs and the traffickers that are the ones that are targeting our families that we really desperately want to stop. We want to hold them accountable. This is one way that will help do that.
Thank you. I'm asking we not adopt this amendment because as a policy committee, moving a policy bill forward, it's highly unusual to put specific dollar numbers in the bill. 2 years ago, when the Blake decision dropped on us like a grenade in the middle of the session, we had no choice because we were right up against the clock and did put specific dollar numbers in that bill. But now this bill likely is going to go to the Appropriations Committee, and that is the Fiscal Committee. And we also didn't necessarily want to stick to the number that was in the bill that came over from the Senate because maybe we want more. And so that is a decision left up to the Fiscal Committee, so that's why we would remove the specific dollar numbers from this bill. So I ask that we not adopt the amendment. All those in favor of adopting Amendment 163, please say aye. Aye. And any opposed? No. Nay. The amendment is not adopted. Chair recognizes the ranking member for Amendment 170.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move Pat 170, please.
It's been moved that we adopt Amendment Pat 170. The chair recognizes the ranking member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This just has to do with Department of Commerce, and we've asked them to create some grants so that we can talk about substance abuse prevention and build that relationship between law enforcement and community. I grew up with a program that was DARE. There's many other programs out there where we would have someone come in and explain the dangers of drugs, the dangers of fentanyl, and then it was meth and cocaine and other drugs. But I think if we want to stop this cycle of abuse, of drug abuse, that we have to start with the youth. And this simply asks that we're able to go into the schools or set up programs to educate the community as far as drugs and how dangerous they are, so we don't end up here in 10 years.
Yeah, thank you. Chair recognizes Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to very respectfully ask for a no vote, but I want to explain why. So I am actually a strong proponent of programs that promote positive interactions between law enforcement and community. I think we should invest in more of that work. Regarding substance use disorder prevention specifically, I think it would be important. I think we should invest more as a state, but I think we'd want to follow prevention science, ideally, about what works. And just in brief, what some of the things that do work. So Gabor Mate is this famous addiction medicine physician, and he says sort of there's three pieces that will produce a person with substance use disorder. The first is what he calls a susceptible organism, so people high adverse childhood experience scores, for instance. The second is the induction of addictive substance, and the third is stress. The truth of the matter is the number one reason people use drugs is to feel different, and we need to be able to teach young people emotional regulation and distress tolerance skills, ways to feel different other than using drugs. The country that's done this the best was actually Iceland, and they did it through investment in extracurricular activities, massive investment, and they reduced the percentage of youth using substances from 42% to 5%, simply through investing in activities. And the reason is people will say no to drugs when they have something to say yes to. So I completely support both law enforcement community programs and substance use disorder prevention, but again, want to follow prevention science when it comes to those investments. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. The prevention science actually clear on the right messenger on issues related to drugs and potential harm. The DARE program, for instance, unfortunately showed an increase in drug use among adolescents after they were exposed to the program, but the proper messengers, at least from what I understand of the prevention science, is not a police officer, not a parent, not a teacher, but a peer who has maybe been through an experience, or a medical professional. Those are apparently the most effective messengers when it comes to understanding about drugs. Chair recognizes Representative Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I definitely agree that whatever options we have, whether it is something like DARE or if it is something like talking to the kids about other options that they have to deal with pain or disappointment that they're dealing with, to be able to find healthy ways to show them that there's different ways besides drugs to do that, that's great. I totally 100% support that. I'm going to push back on the DARE program, though, because I've seen it work. And I disagree that a parent talking to a child doesn't make a difference. I, again, have seen that work. as well, and there is nobody better suited to help guide their children than a parent. So that I will definitely push back on. I think that, it's again sad that, we are here. When we had the DARE program, we did not have the numbers of people dying from drugs every single day that we do now. That is a matter of fact. We have far more people dying every single day. So I would argue that what we've done since the DARE program is absolutely not working, considering there are far more people dying. So I will absolutely ask for a yes vote.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor of adopting Amendment 170, please say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed?
No.
The amendment is not adopted. Chair recognizes Representative Griffey, Amendment 179.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Amendment 179.
It is moved that we adopt Amendment 179. Chair recognizes Representative Griffey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While I believe that the court should actually facilitate transportation of the people that need this drug evaluation, I think at minimum they can give a list of resources on how to get there. When dealing with my daughter, I guarantee you the state is sheltering someone from me that literally doesn't have any knowledge or ability, and at least we could give her a little bit.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I urge its adoption.
Thank you. I support this amendment as well. We did receive some indication of concern from the courts who need to remain neutral. The language of the bill required the courts to assist the defendant, and your language in this amendment actually fixes that. So we definitely want to be able to provide transportation, or at least more information about transportation. So I do support the amendment. All those in favor of adopting Amendment 179, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The amendment is adopted. The next amendment, 164, the chair recognizes the ranking member.
Thank you very much. I'd like to move Pat 164, please.
It's been moved to Adopt Amendment 164. Chair recognizes the ranking member.
This amendment, thank you for running these amendments for us, talks about successful completion of a pretrial diversion for certain drug offenses. So in the language in the underlying bill, it talks about how you need to meet meaningful engagement, and that sounds very potentially minimal, and we're trying to cure people, or at least make their lives better with substance abuse. Completion of services. So this says, can we please finish the program and make sure that we can't insist that someone engage, but they can get a certificate at the end to show that they've been through the training and what they need, and they've been given all the tools they do to be successful outside of the rehab center. So I think it's important that if we're going to give them the option to not do jail time, then they need to put in the effort to complete. And I know many of the programs that we've looked into, they do everything they can to help someone be successful. So I ask
Thank
for a
you.
yes vote.
Further remarks? Chair recognizes Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, going to very respectfully ask for a no vote. And the reason is actually less to do with the amendment specifically and more kind of a critique of our substance use disorder treatment system. Substance use disorder is a chronic, progressive, fatal brain disease. It can be treated, but it cannot be cured. It's much similar to cancer. It can be put into remission. Unfortunately, for the last 50 plus years, Washington State has treated a chronic disease with an acute care model. 28 days of residential treatment, followed by 8 to 12 weeks of intensive outpatient treatment, and then we graduate people as if they are, give them a certificate as if they are cured, and unfortunately the rates of return to use or relapse are incredibly high. And we really need to start pivoting to more of a chronic disease management model where we invest heavily, not just in treatment, but we invest as heavily and really double down on the recovery support services that coincide with and follow treatment. And so if we're actually really interested in meaningful, sustained remission from this disease, meaningful engagement over a period of time is actually going to be a better indicator than completion of a particular finite program and sort of graduating people as if they are done. We really want to keep folks engaged for their lifetime, because battling this disease is a lifetime endeavor. It's a one day at a time disease. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Further remarks? Chair recognizes Representative Graham.
Again, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm speaking in support of this amendment. Not, you know, if we are going to make positive strides towards helping individuals be able to get their life back again, and this is, it's personal for me. I've seen people struggle, and I have heard a lot from people in my district that talked about their own struggles with substance abuse. And, you know, we've seen since the inception of State v. Blake that there has not been, you know, a lot of people that are seeking help. They're just not doing it. So there, you know, that indicates that there's definitely a problem there. And I'm going to go back to what it is that I'm hearing from people in my district that have had substance abuse, and they have said without the accountability part, kind of like what we've done with our drug courts, that without being able to be separated from the drugs where they can get their head cleared up and get connected with services, that, and the accountability part from the courts, they don't believe that they would be alive today. And I think that that counts for something. I think that that matters when we're hearing that coming from people that are suffering from this. And I understand, you know, once you suffer from this, you're always going to have the issues with it. I, like so many of you, have family members that deal with the same thing, and they do have to be careful about what they do or what they don't do. But I also know that they were successful because there were expectations for them to recover and to stay that way. So I'm urging a yes on this amendment.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor of adopting Amendment 164, please say aye. Aye. And any opposed? No. Nay. The amendment is not adopted. Chair recognizes Representative Graham for moving adoption of 165.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move PAT 165.
It's been moved that we adopt Amendment 165. Remarks? Representative Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In line with what we've been talking about, this requires the courts of limited jurisdiction to impose a minimum term of 21 days when a sentenced person convicted of certain drug offenses who refuse to submit to substance use disorder assessment or to comply with recommended treatment as a condition of probation. This is an important tool, and you know, I'm going to point to what we have been dealing with when it comes to police use of force. If we don't have something like this in place as an alternative, what option are we giving the police if they need, you know, to do testing, you know, for the assessment? If they refuse to do that, what other tools are we leaving for them to be successful? So I'm urging a yes on this amendment.
Thank you. Further remarks? The chair recognizes the vice chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment actually imposes a mandatory minimum term of 21 days. I'm asking for a no for several reasons. You're right. Police and prosecutors need an alternative, and tying their hands and making them impose a mandatory minimum is actually something my prosecutor actually testified and asked us to take out of the bill, because judges, and every case is going to be different, and hopefully people are not being incarcerated over a health issue. But if they are given a mandatory minimum of 21 days, we see that with mandatory minimums, the death rates have increased. When people are incarcerated and forced into abstinence and they're released, actually many more people die that way. So I will be asking for a no vote.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the Association of Washington Cities and the prosecutors and, of course, the judges whose discretion is being taken away, they all opposed this particular provision, so asking for a no. All those in favor of adopting Amendment 165, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? Nay. The amendment is not adopted. Chair recognizes the ranking member, Amendment 167.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move Pat 167, please.
It's been moved that we adopt Amendment 167. The chair recognizes the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This has to do with the fact that when we read the details on the bill, it looked like there was an opportunity to not check on someone who had been entered into with a service provider and was in a treatment center. We want to make sure that there's at least monthly versus only past monthly. So the way the bill was written, you could check in, be there a couple of days, disappear, leave, and then no one would know that for up to a month. And so I asked for a yes on this amendment.
Thank you. I support this amendment as well. Believe we should adopt it. Yes, we do need regular periodic check-ins for sure. All those in favor of adopting Amendment 167, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The amendment is adopted. Chair recognizes Representative Graham to move adoption of 166.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Pat 166.
It's been moved that we adopt Amendment 166. Chair recognizes Representative Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment requires the court to reinstate a minimum portion of the applicable person's suspended sentence if the individual that's suffering with substance abuse is shown that they have willfully abandoned doing what they agreed to do for treatment, then this is again reasonable to allow the courts to have some teeth if they are imposing the treatment that they go through treatment and the person willfully does not do that, then they should be able to reinstate a portion of that sentence. I'm urging a yes on this amendment.
Thank you. For the remarks, Chair recognizes the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, asking for a no vote. This is a repeat similar to the last amendment, Pat 165, around mandatory minimums and requiring the court to do certain things where we are really trying to move to a humane, individualized approach to care for people who have a medical issue and use therapeutic model instead of punishment. And I believe the cities and the judges and the prosecutors have agreed that they do not want mandatory minimums or to be required to do certain punitive things. So asking for a no vote.
Thank you. Yes, again, we want to make sure that there's enough judicial discretion to apply any sanctions tailored to the individual circumstances and not sort of established in law. Those in favor of adopting Amendment 166, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? Nay. The amendment is not adopted. Chair recognizes Representative Graham again. Amendment 1. Yeah, we've got Graham here. Representative Graham, 172. It's the top of the next page.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let's see here. This amendment requires the Administrative Office of the Courts to collect data and report annually on the recidivism rate for persons who participate in pretrial diversions. That's an important factor if we again are working towards being able to support programs that help individuals be successful in their treatment. We need to be able to keep track of the pros and the cons. It either worked or it didn't. And that's the best way to do that is to collect the data that allows us to compare and contrast the outcomes. I'm asking for a yes on this amendment.
Thank you. I agree. The chair agrees that in addition to the other data the Administrative Office of the Courts collects, that they should be reporting on recidivism. And so I do support this amendment and asking for its adoption. All those in favor of adopting Amendment 172, please say aye. Aye. And any opposed? The amendment is adopted. Now the chair recognizes Representative Griffey, Amendment 173.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move 173.
It's been moved that we adopt Amendment 173. Representative Griffey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment requires that the Administrative Office of the Courts, in association with the Washington Association of Police and Sheriffs and State Patrol, work together and compile a report that they deliver to the legislature so we can make better decisions on the number of violations that are reported to them. I think we're going to need this because I think we're going to be working for 20 years trying to fulfill the promises within this bill. I urge its adoption.
Thank you. Once again, there's no such thing as too much data, and as long as it's accurate. So again, supporting this amendment to gather this information. All those in favor of adopting Amendment 173, please say aye. Aye. And any opposed? That amendment is adopted. Chair recognizes the ranking member, Amendment 168.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move Pat 168, please.
It's been moved that we adopt Amendment 168. The chair recognizes the ranking member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So this bill asks that we get a public hearing if there's going to be one of these certifications and licensing, because any essential public facility must have public process. And just as we do for other buildings that are essential to the public that we live in, we want to make sure that they have a say in where these things are cited. I ask for a yes vote.
Thank you for the remarks. Chair recognizes Representative Farivar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to be respectfully asking for a no vote. Unfortunately, these hearings tend to encourage a lot of stigma around folks who are seeking treatment and support for the behavioral health challenges that they're trying to address. I'm also not familiar of other healthcare facilities outside of behavioral health treatment facilities that actually require a public hearing. Want to make sure that we're encouraging folks to seek out treatment and recovery supports, and I worry that allowing for these hearings to continue will only, unfortunately, devolve into a fear-mongering and stigmatizing experience. So respectfully asking for a no.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Representative Griffey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I serve on the local government committee, and this is considered an essential public facility. Any essential public facilities must have a public process. That is in keeping with current law. The state of Washington actually violates that part of the Growth Management Act on a regular basis. We shouldn't violate the law when implementing this one. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I urge its adoption.
Chair recognizes Representative Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm also urging the adoption of this amendment, and I'm going to bring it back to, again, you know, what I hear from my district is that there's been a lot of people really upset with what's been happening lately, where there have been public meetings in which they've not been able to participate. And why does this matter? It matters because it's playing out in Spokane right now. There are a number of really angry people, and the sad part is that they support the treatment that we're talking about. The concern comes in where you have a facility that they talked about having maybe 50 people that are in that facility. They're doing great. They are really thriving. That's what it is we want. However, the people were being prevented from weighing in that they wanted to put a tiny home village next to it that did not, it was a low barrier, so they could use drugs. That is going to jeopardize the people that are next door that have been doing really well. That is definitely not good policy. And, you know, we are here to serve the people. We are here, you know, to listen to their voices. And that's how you do that, is in public meetings where we should be able to hear from our constituents. So I'm again urging adopting this amendment. It's really.
Thank you. Further remarks? No? All those in favor of adopting Amendment 168, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? No. Nay. The amendment is not adopted. Finally, Chair recognizes the ranking member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is another appropriation that came from the Senate budget. Verbatim words, may I have permission to read?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Appropriates 49.017 million from the general fund state and 4.3 million from the general fund federal to the Healthcare Authority relating to funding for opioid use disorder medication. Department of Health certified clubhouses, 24-hour crisis relief centers, certain community grants, and law enforcement assisted diversion programs. This is a language that came from the Senate budget, and we want to keep that in here versus, I realize it's not appropriation committee, but we want to keep that funding in there. All of those are critically important, especially I would say the 23-hour crisis centers where we can drop someone off, and without guarantees that we will get more money by taking it out, then we have a lot of concerns that it may disappear. So I ask for a yes on this amendment.
Thank you. Once again, this is a policy committee, and we're moving a policy bill through. It's highly unusual to put specific dollar numbers in the bill. Let's roll the dice and hope that when it comes out of the appropriations process, it's going to be even more than 49 million, because that's what we're hoping. And that's actually one of the reasons why we want to remove specific dollar numbers from this bill, to allow us to negotiate with the other body to get more appropriations. So respectfully asking we not adopt this amendment. All those in favor of adopting Amendment 169, please say aye. Aye. And those opposed? Nay. No. The amendment is not adopted. Madam Vice Chair. Oh. Let's do it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that the adopted amendments be incorporated into a striking amendment, and that, let me get the number. Hold on. Engrossed second substitute Senate Bill 5536 be reported out of committee with a do pass as amended recommendation.
We now have before us engrossed second substitute Senate Bill 5536, the striker as amended. And now it's time for final passage. Comments? Are you going to go first? I'll just comment that this is a massive systems change that is still underway. It is very difficult for me and a number of my colleagues here to vote to continue criminal penalties. This is a health problem, a public health problem. 50 plus years of experience has shown us that the punitive approach does not deter drug use. I am hesitant to criminalize those who are suffering from behavioral health disorders, and perhaps even to return to the egregious racial disparities of the war on drugs. However, on balance, this bill builds out a behavioral health infrastructure to intervene in a much more effective and evidence-based fashion with those who are suffering from substance use disorder. And so on balance, I am willing to support this bill. Further remarks? Chair recognizes the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And sadly, we don't have to look too far into Washington State to see people suffering from addiction. I feel fortunate I grew up when I did, because there wasn't as many people, at least around us, suffering that we couldn't help. So for me, this is a helpless bill, and we need to do everything we can to get the people off of the street. It's on the streets, it's in rehab centers, they're filled, and especially on the east side, and it's in our own families, it's in schools. So I definitely feel like this is a small step forward from what we have today, which is ignoring them twice before we take action. And I have the privilege of representing Yakima area, and we've literally seen people who are addicted with needles in their arms, and we've Narcaned the same people twice in one night on a ride-along. And there's nothing more heartbreaking than watching someone angry that you saved their life, or the officer saved their life, because we took the highway. So this is the beginning of a very long conversation, I hope. I think that there's many, many unanswered questions in the bill before us. What happens when there's no treatment available? You know, many times we find someone, and I work with law enforcement often, who will say, I can't find a bed. I have someone who says, today I want to get off heroin or meth, or I don't want to take fentanyl anymore. And we'll say, well, we'll find you something in a few weeks. And likely they don't make it the few weeks. So I feel like this is not the answer, but it's a better answer than ignoring them completely as they suffer in the winter, often on the sidewalk. Also, I think that, we had concerns, the chair both and I did, discussing this bill over the weekend, that if somebody tests with an SUD that they didn't have a problem, right? They weren't addicted, then what happens, right? I mean, there's so many pieces in here that aren't done yet, and I really hope that we can get there before the end of session and not run it into interim, because in the meantime, people are dying. What if they leave treatment? What if they walk out and leave treatment? The bill doesn't address that in a way that I think gives us a solution for that person who's suffering. And how many times can you repeat this cycle? Well, the answer is to infinity, right? We don't have an off-ramp. We don't have a way for them to get out of this cycle under this legislation, which is very alarming. And again, just like on vehicular pursuit, I think we can do better. So I'll be a yes today, but it's a yes with recommendation, which doesn't exist. But I think that I'm just really looking forward to the conversation, and I've learned so much through this process, and I've learned that it's our responsibility on this dais to fix it. So this bill is not the answer. I understand the no's. We didn't go far enough, and we didn't answer just even the questions that I just talked about. So thank you for bringing this forward and continuing the conversation, or promising to.
Yeah, thank you for the hard work. It's been an honor working with you. Chair recognizes the vice chair.
Thank you, Chair Goodman. This bill is really hard for me because I am the only person that I know on this committee that has lived with substance use disorder every day for 45 years now. I was born into a family of people that suffered with substance use disorder, every single person. My father, my mother, my brother, my sister, my aunt, my uncle, my cousins, every single person in my family, outside of my children, have suffered with substance use disorder and been incarcerated. And I think it's bullshit that we have to sit here and stigmatize people like me again and not understand that there are multiple pathways to recovery. It's not just treatment. I was kicked out of treatment after 3 days for throwing my water bottle because I was coming down off meth and I wanted a cigarette. And I had 5 years of clean time that time, this last time, I have 11 and a half years now, and it is a daily chronic disease. I have to do many things every single day to make sure I stay clean. I have to maintain therapy. Therapy works for me now. It wasn't always mental health therapy. It was recovery, social connection. It was treatment. It was Narcotics Anonymous. It's been different things at different times in my life. And this bill doesn't recognize a lot of things, which I really think that peer support and social connection is way more effective than treatment. But we're putting people into this dinosaur era of possibilities and saying, when you complete this treatment, then maybe your record will be vacated and you can go get a job and you can maybe volunteer in your kids' school and rent an apartment, things that I still can't do today because of my criminal record. And so the stigmatization and the criminalization of people that have substance use disorder, when a lot of people actually use drugs recreationally and they don't cause any problems. What we are doing in this bill is targeting people that live outside and that are using on the public bus and criminalizing substance use disorder in a very harmful way. And again, I think we're not following research and science and logic. And in fact, we are again stigmatizing people and leaving them out of employment, housing, volunteering with their kids' school, all those things by giving them a criminal record. So I think it is horrible that we're doing this, and we have to do something, because if not, local jurisdictions, all the fear-mongering that has gone on in the last 2 years, people living unhoused outside, using drugs, and the political pressure, local jurisdictions will continue to create a patchwork of policies. And so I will vote for this today, but I will continue to work on it in appropriations and to the floor. And I do think we're gonna have to come back and work on it again. Just like when we did all the police reform and you have to make tweaks, we're gonna have to make tweaks again next session. And one day we will get to the place where we actually care for people and help them get into recovery and help them stay in recovery and stop the stigma. Thanks.
Thank you for your remarks. Chair recognizes Representative Farivar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all who've been speaking on this. There are pieces of each one that I really resonate with. You know, one of my big concerns with this legislation is I worry that we're not centering the voices of folks with direct lived experience with substance use who've come into contact with the criminal legal system. I think all of you here know that that is of the utmost importance for me to make sure that we've got folks with direct lived experience that can tell us what is and isn't working. You know, we assembled a group of folks to think about these issues and come up with recommendations, the SURSAC, and what they recommended was decriminalization, and that's not the direction we're going in this legislation. You know, this really is, I think, as a couple of people have mentioned already, I mean, this is a public health crisis, and I don't believe that incarcerating individuals is the way that we're going to get out of this crisis. You know, our jails and our prisons, they're at capacity, our law enforcement, they're at capacity, and we're not doing them any favors in this situation. I want to make sure that we are, coming up with an effective way to support folks who are experiencing substance use and make sure that we are opening up law enforcement so they can respond to genuine harm in our communities and make sure that we're investing in the right things, which to me is treatment and recovery supports. Otherwise, we're not going to interrupt this cycle, as you, ranking member, mentioned earlier, that this is a cycle of incarceration and crisis. And we have to invest in that full spectrum of treatment and recovery supports, as the vice chair mentioned. Those recovery supports are going to be critical in this process. And this legislation just doesn't do that. And for those reasons, I'm going to be a no today.
Thank you. Further remarks? Chair recognizes Representative Griffey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a no today, too, because I think it's a significant missed opportunity. We should have lowered the bar for civil commitment. When friends drive drunk, we say that we take the keys away. And as a 911 responder, for many years, this legislature says I need to go when somebody calls 911. I go now. And I try to talk them into getting help when they're high and walking around the middle street. And since we passed all the reforms or lack thereof, most of the time we just let them walk around in the street. My daughter has been mentally ill and substance addicted for almost 10 years now in this system. This system, without massive amounts of money, massive amounts of resources, massive amounts of build out that I don't know that we have made commitment to do, is not going to work. More people are going to die. As a matter of fact, I read all the other studies and I feel like I'm lectured to quite often, but when you read further down, you can compel people to go down the right path, but you have to stay with them longer. Our system right now, we stay with them, we put them 30 days inpatient, and then now with this bill, we let them check out of inpatient into homelessness in Vancouver or released into homelessness until we decide that we're not going to release people in crisis into homelessness. We're really not going to make a dent. I think, and the bill changed so much from what has already been debated. It's not even, as a good gentlelady talked about, we spent a year on the SURSAC committee and SURSAC couldn't even come up with it, the right way to deal with this. I think we're putting 911 responders in a really bad situation because for the next 10 or 15 years, we're going to say, show up, try to talk to them, and let them go. And I really do not think that is a loving policy. For that reason, Mr. Chair, I'm going to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Representative Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this, in regards to this policy, I grew up in Washington State, Federal Way and Auburn. And I think what absolutely floors me is that, at that time, we had policies in place that dealt with a lot of the issues that we've gone the opposite way on now. Having grown up in Washington State, things haven't gotten better. They've gotten far worse. And, in conjunction with this, again, I'm going to bring up Norway. I, have heard this talked about, that we want the outcomes that Norway has. Well, I think it's fair at this point in time, if we're going to continue talking about that, that we need to start looking at, it's not just about the outcome. In Norway, you're not allowed to drink in public. You can't even be on your balcony and do that. You're not allowed to do drugs and stuff in public. They actually will, if you do not submit to treatment, they can force you to go into treatment, which is, again, the total opposite of what it is that we are doing here. Again, I am at a loss for how many people we have dying every single day. That's another thing that Norway does, is their borders are not wide open. They don't have thousands of people crossing over every single day. We do, because that's not happening. They also are very hard on people that are trafficking drugs into their country. They don't mess around with that. Again, we're doing the total opposite of what it is they do. Their prison system is very expensive for the outcomes that they get. And another thing that, again, really floors me is they fund that with oil and natural gas. Think about that for a minute. Oil and natural gas. That's how they fund this. So, what they're doing clearly is working, because otherwise we wouldn't be wanting the outcomes of what Norway does. The problem is that we're not willing to do the supports that get them to that outcome. And until we are not going to get their outcome. So I, again, with compassion towards the people in my district that are business owners, that are families, that are just really struggling with people that will not get help. And their families, their businesses are in grave danger. That matters too. If we're talking about having compassion for the people that have substance abuse, we need to have compassion for our families, our businesses, and our communities that are no longer safe, because, again, we're moving in the wrong direction for being able to deal with dangerous people that refuse to get help. So for that reason, I will be a no today.
Thank you for all of your remarks. So we're a little bit over time, a lot over time here, so we're going to have to move along. I'll ask the staff to bring up the standing committee report, and please call the roll.
Goodman.
Representative Goodman votes aye.
Rep. Goodman votes aye. Simmons.
Aye with recommendation.
Rep. Simmons votes aye. Mosbrucker.
Mosbrucker votes aye.
Rep. Mosbrucker votes aye. Griffey.
Nay, do not pass.
Rep. Griffey votes nay, do not pass. Davis.
Aye.
Rep. Davis votes aye. Farivar.
Farivar, nay, do not pass.
Rep. Farivar votes nay, do not pass. Fossey.
Aye.
Rep. Fossey votes aye. Graham.
Graham votes nay, do not pass.
Rep. Graham votes nay, do not pass. Ramos.
Aye.
Rep. Ramos votes aye.
Okay, that was real enthusiastic. Do any members wish to change or adjust their votes? All right, hearing none, if the staff could please take the record.
Mr. Chair, there are 6 aye, 3 nay, 0 excused.
Thank you. By your vote, the committee reports out engrossed second substitute Senate Bill 5536 with a do pass as amended recommendation. That concludes our work for the day, concludes our work on Senate bills. We will convene a 1-hour session within another week or two. I'm not sure what date we'll figure it out, to have an interim planning session to discuss what we want to work on over the interim in preparation for the next legislative session. So we'll have a little staff appreciation at that time as well. So thank you very much for your hard work on this. This is very difficult work, but of great consequence to our communities. And we are adjourned. Thank you.